Hello.
Hi, Mario.
So they're going into Lebanon, boots on
Yeah,
the
looks like they have to. Yeah,
boots on the ground.
yeah, in Lebanon. Yeah,
Shit.
Hezbollah woke up.
Ugh,
Yeah,
this is never going to end.
doesn't the government of Lebanon has no power over Hezbollah? I mean, it's like
No, they don't.
they don't have an army, their own army.
They do, but you know,
What a joke country.
it, you see this. The presidency in Lebanon has to be Christian, but then the prime minister and the Congress, they're all Islamists. So
Oh, that's a rule. That's how it goes.
I remember Eli used to go there a lot, and he used to tell me it was beautiful.
Yeah, everyone
And
says it's like the Paris of the Mediterranean or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ernie.
151, right? 150.
50. Okay, great. Setting a trap. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
dealing with all the halachas of animals on Shabbos. There's a lot on it. So we have discussed actively trapping an animal on Shabbat. According to Tosfos, it's forbidden midrabanan to set a trap, like a mouse trap, so that the animal will become trapped at some point without any continued active involvement. Tosfos says you can't do such a thing. Ein portion mitsudos. You can't spread out. I would say they're net. A mitsuda is like a net or a trap. Avagad de b'Shabbos nami and pirsh mitzuda and chayv chatis. Now you're not going to be chayv a chatis if you did it. She'ena yodeim yotzrim lav. You don't know whether an animal is going to come and step into this trap, so you can't be accused of violating Shabbos because you don't know for sure it's going to happen. It's a gzeira. Mikol mokum gozru lifrosh mitzuda. It was a gzeira rabbanon, stay away from laying traps. The pami masi lechiyuv chatas kigon shenasu prisasu yilkot. For example, let's say while he's opening up the trap, an animal walks in. Then you'd be chayv chatas. So to avoid that, there's a gzeira, don't set the traps at all. The Tosefta says that if you open up a trap and immediately an animal walks into that trap, then you'd be chayv chatas. The Mishnah Brura, right, also wrote that it's forbidden. If you set a trap and an animal walks right in, and you're chayv chatas. Now, if the animal got trapped later on, then you don't get a chatas, but it's still osir. Cause of a Magen Avram de mikan muchach sheyesh lizor shlo lamid b'Shabbos hamitzur letzud buach borim. Magen Avram notes that you should not set mice traps on Shabbos. It's really a gzeira, but it's prohibited. Based on this, it seems that it's permitted to set a trap before Shabbos, even if the trap will ensnare animals on Shabbos. The basis for this allowance comes from the permission to set up utensils on Erev Shabbos that will cause malacha to be done on Shabbos, in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel, as we learned in the Mishnah. Beis Shammai amrim ein portion mitzudas chayv oifos v'dagim ela kadesh yatsu mibod yom. You're allowed to set traps according to Beis Shammai if there's enough time in Friday for an animal to be trapped there. So, for example, according to Beis Shammai, if you set a trap 20 seconds before Shabbos, you wouldn't be allowed to do it because there's not enough time for an animal to be trapped, even though you've done nothing on Shabbos. The trap was set before Shabbos, and the animal gets trapped on Shabbos, but l'chori, it should be okay. In fact, Beis Hillel matiri. Beis Hillel permit you to set a trap 20 seconds before Shabbos, you're permitted to do it. The malacha is going to be done on Shabbos, but you set it up Erev Shabbos. We paskin like Beis Hillel. The Yakut Yosef says, "Asur lifros mitzvah b'Shabbos. Afkidei lotzud achbar." You can't set up a mouse trap on Shabbos. Al pishin achbar nitzot tekav b'Shabbos prisas mitzvah. Even though the mouse is not trapped right before. Aval lifros me'erev Shabbos mutter. And he doesn't designate a certain amount of time before. No, you can set a trap Erev Shabbos anytime Erev Shabbos. That's permitted. If the trap successfully ensnares an animal, it is permitted to release the animal on Shabbos without touching it. Mutter l'shachrer kol bal chayim anitzot ki asur rak tzeidoso. You can free an animal that's in a trap. But freeing it is okay. You can't touch it. They're muktzah. We'll discuss this later. Okay. Page 152. Trapping and confining a person. Does the malach of trapping apply to people as well? 1 second. One second. 1 second. One second. Yes, 1 second. Okay, sorry. Does the malacha of trapping apply to people? Although this question does not appear to have been discussed in the Gemara Rishonim, there may be some precedent from an account in the Torah in which a person was found violating Shabbos. He was placed in holding until his judgment was determined. Assuming that this took place on Shabbos, it would seem to indicate that there is no issue for trapping for humans in this case, like putting somebody in prison. The chora, this doesn't seem to be a problem. This is the case of the Makoshesh Eitzim. Vayub bnei Yisrael b'midbar, the Jewish people were in the midbar, vayimtzeu ish Makoshesh Eitzim b'yom Shabbat. They found him to be a Makoshesh Eitzim. There's a whole debate exactly what did this guy do. And by the way, there is a Masorah that this was Tzlofchad. And the daughters, and eventually this person was put to death. So that's why the daughters of Tzlofchad came to Moshe and said, our father got a share in the land. Well, but he's not around. He died. What do we inherit his share? And that's that whole shita, that this Makoshesh was Tzlofchad. It says, "Vayakrivu oso amotzim oso Makosheshim u'motchev l'ron v'koleida, vayanicho oso b'mishmar." They put him into prison. Ki lo farash ma yaselo. Wasn't clear what he had done. The normal translation, Makoshesh Yitzim, he was gathering wood. The Piskei Tshuva is citing the Sefer Kovetz, which is a commentary on the Rambam, which writes simply that the prohibition of trapping does in fact apply to people. The Piskei Tshuva then cites a suggestion as to how the Sefer Kovetz would understand the psukim mentioned. But the Piskei Tshuva quotes the Avnei Nezer, who suggests that this should not apply to adults who are fully responsible for themselves. Moreover, others write that the definition of trapping only applies to those species which tend to elude humans, and this cannot apply to people. The Sefer Kovetz al Rambam Kosav, the Gamat Sad Adam Yesh B'Zeh Mishum Misur Tzeda, that according to the Sefer Kovetz, that there is a prohibition of hunting by putting a person into prison. People go to war, and people are taken prisoner. What about the fact that they placed the Makoshish into a prison? Because the whole problem was breaking Shabbos, it was permitted to override Shabbos by putting him there. We should have the Nezir tears to Ba'adam Gadol, for an adult who has his own free will, trapping doesn't apply. But one who traps or confines children would violate a prohibition. Some say that the prohibition of trapping only applies to those species that run away from human beings. In general, people don't run away, so they would not apply according to that criteria. Support for the approach that trapping never applies to humans can be brought from the fact that Rishonim discussed whether an individual guilty of a crime may be arrested and placed in jail on Shabbos. In this context, there are more rights that because there's a prohibition against judgment in a Beis Din on Shabbos, Beis Din doesn't operate on Shabbos. Now, one of the methods of putting somebody to death was burning. Now, you're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. So from there, Chazal rule that since you can't carry out that type of capital punishment, you can't deal with any capital punishment. So Beis Din doesn't operate on Shabbos. So therefore, since imprisoning is also something that's a function of Beis Din, we also may not imprison them on Shabbos to prevent them from escaping punishment. However, the possibility that trapping applies to humans is not brought as a consideration here. Ein donin, says the Shulchan Aruch, we don't operate Beis Din on Shabbos. L'chein osur litfos lachnis beis hasohar mishnis chai ve'ez onesh. The Rambam says you cannot put somebody in prison who's somebody who's chai ve'onesh. Now, the Ramah lived in Krakow in like the 1580s. Okay, so what's he talking about? Well, on one of my trips to Eastern Europe, when I went with my son, when we went on one of those Holocaust trips, we visited a little Galician town, Rimanov, and there's an old shul, and in the shul was a jail, was a prison. There was a segment, and so remember, Beis Din would put people into prison. Let's say they didn't give a get. They put them into jail, or whatever, for whatever Beis Din would some of the punishment of the Beis Din was put them in tfisa, and the tfisa was in the shul, so they could attend minyan. I mean, there's a whole concept of this, like what they do, in these prison camps in the East Coast, where all these wealthy people who were sent to jail, they all have minyanim, they have daf yomi. It's a whole. They build a sukkah. The kol came to Oshula Koso. You can't give him malchus. David Michal Din v'im yivrach ein aleinu klum. Within this context, it's important to note that the Ramah speaks specifically of imprisoning to ensure that the person will later be punished. The Mishnah writes that this does not apply to a married man who plans to run off and leave his wife stranded and bound to him without giving her a get. So he says it does not apply to somebody like avoiding giving a get. אין בכלל זה אם אחד רוצה לברוח כדי להגן אשתו. Oh, you would be allowed to imprison him if he's threatening to run away. The term in Aguna classic halacha refers to a woman who is stuck married to an absent man. The situation arises from a circumstance in which the man has disappeared and there's no way to prove that he has died. In contemporary times, the word is often used to refer to a man who has refused to issue his wife a get. In cases where which one is warranted. So the Mishnah Berurah says you could put him in prison. In light of this source in the Ramah, most Achronim assume that trapping almost never applies to humans. In the Piskei Teshuvos, it's noted that most opinions do not believe that trapping applies to humans in any form. But the Piskei Teshuvos recommends being stringent when possible to comply with the stringent opinion. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach explains that people do not generally try to evade capture from other people aside from particular situations, such as a criminal trying to evade specific individuals. Consequently, this does not qualify as trapping, unlike animals that will always attempt to avoid capture by humans. Says the Shmir Shabbos Kolchasa, Ein Yesodei Yeshurun, B'Shem Agon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Da'af b'misha nigmar dina l'misa. A person who has been convicted and sentenced to death, Vitzadin oso lahorgo, and they're trying to capture him so they could carry out the punishment. Esher degam kein leka shum iser. Perhaps there's no prohibition. Even according to the one that says that if you do a work of the Mishkan, but you do it in a different way, for example, the malach in the Mishkan was to trap an animal so a chilazon that you could use its dye. Here you're trapping a man, it's for a different reason. So even according to Mandar that says malach shein tzricha l'chayiv, the davka b'shoita b'rech b'nei adam u'mizboded b'yaros u'midbaros. That's, for example, a crazy person who runs away to the forest. As yesh makom ladun, you can adjudicate shekivin shadarku lishavi b'tachid de'adam. This person actually does try to avoid people. Ulai chashav nami davar shebimino nitzah. Maybe such a person would be considered somebody that you'd be chai for hunting. Kivin shugilim l'lachim l'kachim anashim b'shevi. People like this are taken captive. Aval b'mishin in sekol azman b'chevret anashim. But you're talking about a person who's in society. He doesn't have in mind to escape anywhere. He's escaping police. Even though he has freedom to be among the people he wants to be, by trapping him, he's among other people. So it would not be considered trapping. If you trap someone and he's not unhappy, let's say somebody is drowning and you save him, you didn't trap him. So he wants to be saved. He's lost his freedom. He's not in control of himself when he's drowning. Even if the act of life-saving would be categorized as trapping, the lifeguard or other bystander would, of course, be requiring to violate Shabbos to save the life of the person in the water, because pikuach nefesh is doich everything. Returning to the ruling of the Ramah, it would seem that according to this, enforcement authorities would be prohibited from detaining or arresting potential criminals. Nevertheless, the Piskei Teshuvos writes that it is permitted to confine or imprison on Shabbat anyone who poses a danger or threat to the public, similar to the ruling of the Mishnah Berurah, permitting a man to be detained because running away would harm another person, for example, the man's wife. Mishnah Berurah, Siv Katan Yud Daled, says the Piskei Teshuvos, Ve'en b'chlal zeh im echad rotza livrok kedei laged es ishto. Somebody wants to escape because he wants to make his wife naguna. B'zeh muter, the Mishnah Berurah said you could put him in prison. This leads to peace and harmony among the community. Temporarily, could go on of a parcel deer. Let's say you have a thief that's coming into people's homes. Or other people are fighting and causing disharmony in the tzibur. If you can put him under home arrest, better. And if you could do it by a non-Jew. Okay. That completes section 1 of the laws of animals. Let's go to the next section, section 4. Halachas of animals on Shabbos 2. Page 171. In the previous year, we studied the halachos of tzeda, trapping. In this year, we'll discuss killing animals. And here comes very important halach of muktzah relating to animals, and the additional rabbinic prohibition against feeding animals on Shabbos. The Mishnah Masechta Shabbos lists shchita as one of the 39 melachos prohibited on Shabbos. The Gemara quotes a dispute among the Amoraim regarding the nature of this malacha, but concludes that all agree that taking the life of an animal constitutes an independent av malacha. The dispute is only as to whether one who slaughters an animal also violates the malacha of tzoveya, dying, as the hide of the animal will invariably become reddened. This is desirable so that those buying the meat will see that the animal was freshly slaughtered. The Gemara noted that in the Mishnah, one of the avos was hashochto. Now, what is he chayiv for if he shechts? Rava mamishum tzoveya, dying. Shmuel Amar mishum netilas neshama. Shmuel says it's because of taking a life. So the Gemara doesn't understand. Rav mishum tzoveya in mishum netilas neshama lo. Rav also understands that the animal is being killed. Ema af mishum tzoveya. So what Rav is not really arguing with Shmuel. He's adding a prohibition. Of course, you get a prohibition for taking a life, but there's also a dying prohibition. Amarav, milsa de amri. I'll say something. Ema ba milsa to lo lesi dori basroi v'lichkolai, so that later generations won't come and laugh at what I said. So my nichalei nicha de litvis besashchita dama. What kind of dying is this? Oh, the butchers would display the meat with the Beis HaShchita, the neck area, reddened, so people would understand this is freshly slaughtered. It was like an advertisement, so they would buy the meat. It would be to promote commerce, so that people would come and buy, it would be motivational to purchase meat. Now, what animals are included within this prohibition? The Rambam writes that the avalach of taking a life applies to killing any animal, bird, fish, or insect by wounding it. Killing by other means, such as strangling or otherwise removing the oxygen supply, is a tolda. Now, Rashi explained the Gemara by the fact that formal shechita was not essential for the construction of the Mishkan. Although animal hides were required, it would be possible to kill the animals by other methods in order to obtain these hides. You don't have to shecht. If you only need a hide of an animal, and they also shechted animals that they couldn't eat, special hides, and even so, if they only needed the hide and didn't need the meat, you could kill the animal another way. So the Gemara concludes that shechita is just one example of killing, but any other form of killing an animal is also included in the Av Malacha. Tosfos learns differently, where the Gemara does not mean to express any difficulty in understanding the Mishnah. Rather, the Gemara asks independently of the Mishnah, which malacha is violated by slaughtering an animal? The conclusion is that the malacha of taking a life is certainly involved. And there's a dispute whether there's an additional malacha of tzoveya. Page 172. The Rambam says, Hilchos Shabbos, Hashoichet chayiv, the one who slaughters is chayiv, v'lo shoichet bilvad, ala kol anoitel neshama le'echad mikom minei chayiv ve'em v'of v'dag v'sheretz. Anyone who takes the life of a wild or a domesticated animal, a bird, a fish, or an insect, bein b'shchita, whether you slaughter it, bein b'nechira, stabbing it, or b'hakor, you strike it, chayiv. Hachonik es achai, you choke the living, ad shiyamas, or is a tolda shoichet, it's a tolda. Lefichach im hel a dog, misefel shomayim, v'nicho ad shemeis chayiv mishum chonik. You take a fish out of a pail, and you put it on the ground so it dies, you're chayiv. So killing flies and other flying insects is prohibited on Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch does not write explicitly that it is forbidden to kill animals on Shabbos. But some of the specific cases mentioned below concerning dangerous animals and lice are discussed. The Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa writes that one may spray insecticide in order to drive insects away, provided that it's not sprayed directly onto the insects, and therefore the insects are able to escape. Mutar lishtamish betachshir kotel charekim, insecticide, kidei laharchik es charekim in acheder, so that the insects are driven away from that room. Mutar lishtamish l'tzrach zegam betarsis, some kind of spray. He says you should leave a window or a door open so that they'll run away. Don't spray the insecticide on the insects. You can't kill them directly. Many of us have these electric items. You can, a zapper. So you can activate that electric device before Shabbos, or mafafim lumineim, or other flying creatures. You can't turn it on Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch Rav writes that one must be careful not to kill small insects, such as ants, on Shabbos. The Hilchos Shabbos writes that one must therefore not turn on the water from a tap if there are insects in the sink that will be killed by the water. Similarly, one may not walk in an area where he will certainly step on ants. If you throw an animal into water and he dies, so you killed him. If there's an ant in a sink, don't turn on the water. If the ant is going to get, drowned there. You're walking on the sidewalk, you see a lot of ants. You shouldn't step on them. Says the footnote, in some cases, stepping on ants may not necessarily kill them. And it would be permitted to walk on them as they would qualify as a davar she'eino miskavin. You don't have kavanah to kill them. Your kavanah is to walk to shul. See Hilchos Shabbos for further discussion about the case of stepping on ants. In addition, if one has no other way to wash the dishes in the sink, some poskim allow turning on the water, since this may qualify as a psik reisha in the case of two drabanan prohibitions. Killing them is not done for constructive purpose, and it's done in an unusual manner, for which many are lenient. Furthermore, as discussed in volume 17, some are lenient, even the chatchila in case of a psik reisha, de lo nichale, with one drabanan prohibition. See the Minchas Yitzchak, who allows flushing the toilet, even if live insects found inside will be flushed and killed, such as kavod abrios, because kavod abrios is a drabanan, and we know that even rabbinics are stepped over because of human dignity. What about dangerous animals? Page 174. It goes without saying that animals that pose a certain danger to human life must be killed, even on Shabbos, as with any other case of pikuach nefesh, would supersede the laws of Shabbos. Therefore, we can surmise, even before studying any of the sources, that one should kill a bee or wasp found in close proximity to one who is allergic to its sting. Does the same halacha apply concerning cases where an animal or insect may likely harm a person in a manner that is not necessarily life-threatening? The Gemara Masechta Shabbos appears to address this. The Gemara discusses killing certain animals whose bite can be damaging and concludes that one may kill such animals directly if they are chasing a person. Otherwise, one may not kill them directly, but one may tread on them while walking normally. Any damaging creature, harmful creature, can be killed on Shabbos. Mosif Rav Yosef. Chamisha ne'erogin b'Shabbos. 5 types of creatures can be killed on Shabbos. Elaine. Zvuv sheberetz Mitzrayim. An Egyptian fly. Tzira shebeninveh. A hornet that was in Ninveh. Akrav, a scorpion, shebechadyav. Nachash sheberetz Israel. Snakes in Israel. V'kelev shoyte b'chol makom. And a rabid dog, anywhere. Or Rav Yirmiyah man nimalon. Who says that this is a accurate version of the Baraisa? Dilma Mishabeshti, maybe it's confused. Amr Rav Yosef, Ana masnis Allah was vinala, vana metritzala. Baratzra achrav v'divrei hakol. Rav Yosef explained the Baraisa that these, when are we permitted to kill these animals? They're running after him, and therefore there's a real danger. And all opinions allow you to kill them. This, the way we just explained, follows Rashi and is accepted by most of the Rishonim. Tosfos explains Rav Yosef's resolution differently, that it is the Baraisa that speaks of a case where the creatures are running after a person and therefore permits killing the creatures according to all opinions. Rabbi Shua ben Levi goes further and permits killing all animals that may cause damage, even if they are not running after a person. Rav Sheshes disagrees, maintains that if these creatures are not running after a person, one may only kill them indirectly. And Tosfos concludes that the halacha follows Rav Sheshes and not Rav Shua ben Levi. Right? Back to the Gemara, Rav Sheshes, Nachash dorsal fi tumo. You can step on a snake, but not, you have to be walking normally to trample it. On Rav Katina Ikev arsa dorsal fi tumo. Also, you have to step on it while you're walking normally. Regarding the 5 creatures named in the Brisa, Rashi explains that one may kill them even if they're not running after a person. But according to Tosfos, like we explained, it's only permitted if they're running after a person. Most of the Rishonim concur with Rashi, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. This is because the Brisa follows the view of the Tana Reb Shimon that melacha she'ein tzrich legufa. If it's a melacha that's not done for its own sake, it's permitted on a biblical level. Because the hunting insects was because you wanted to use the dye in them or the hide. Here you're trying to protect yourself. So it's a classic melacha she'ein tzrich legufa that Reb Shimon says is potter. Killing, in the footnote, killing these creatures is a melacha she'ein tzrich legufa. One does not plan to use the dead animal for constructive purpose and only wants to prevent them from causing damage. Although melacha she'ein tzrich legufa is usually prohibited on at least on a rabbinic level, this prohibition was relaxed in order to avoid pain. Divrei hakol v'had chamisha nerogin. Rashi says these 5 that are killed, even kishein ratzon achrav, even if they're not running after you, according to Reb Shimon. The Rambam rules similarly. Also applies this principle to any animal that presents a clear danger to human life. Chaya v'remesh, beasts or insects, shein noishchin, that bite, umemisin, and can kill. Vadai, kegon zvuv shemitzrayim, an Egyptian fly. V'tzir shebeninveh, the Ninveh hornet. The scorpion, v'akrav shebechadya, v'nachash shevet Yisrael, v'kelev v'shoyt b'chol makom. Mutter lahargan b'Shabbos k'shi'iru. Once you see them, you can kill them. Ushar kol hamazikin, other damaging animals, Then if they're chasing after you, you can kill them. If they're standing, they're just sitting where they are, or borchin milfan of asula, then you can't kill them. Now, in dorsal fituma b'shas eluchav hargan mutter. Now, if during regular walking you happen to step on them, it's not like you're running after them to trample them. Normal walking, that would be permitted. However, the Rambam cannot agree with Rashi that the Bryce only follows the view of Rav Shimon, as elsewhere the Rambam rules in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda that performing a malacha shein tzrich legufa is prohibited. The Maggid Mishnah therefore explains that according to the Rambam, such deadly animals must be killed due to pikuach nefesh, even if they are not running after a person. Rambam quotes this as being the position of the Aruch, although the Rambam himself rejects this possibility and argues that if the creatures are not running after a person, one should be able to avoid them without resorting to killing them. Pikuach nefesh applies only where there's no alternative. Says the Maggid Mishnah, Zedas Ramban, Varashba, Bikor Adin. This is how the Ramban, the Rashba, paskin. Aval kosvu sheheter elam nuyin b'shein ratzin. These leniencies that were applied when they're not running, dafkul Reb Shimon shapoter b'mlach shein tzrich lagufa. That's only if you hold like Reb Shimon, who says you're not chayiv from lach shein tzrich lagufa. Rabbi Yehuda aserhu shein ze pikuach nefesh gomer. It's not for sure pikuach nefesh. Given shein ratzin, they're not running after him. The zeh shalom kediv Rabbeinu shaposa Rabbi Yehuda uposa kankein. The nearest shadaito shapikuach nefeshu arosim bilvad. It's pikuach nefesh just by seeing them. And the Shulchan Aruch rules similarly to the Rambam. But he does not take a clear position regarding the reasoning behind the leniency to kill dangerous animals that are not running after a person. He says, if we know for sure that these animals or insects will bite and kill you, neragim b'Shabbos, you can kill them on Shabbos, afilo in ratzon achrav, even if they're not running after you. Usharma mezikin, but other damaging things, kugon, nachash va'akrav b'mokim shenem emisim, non-poisonous snakes and scorpions. Then im ratzon achrav mutar l'hargan. If they run after you, you can kill them. Im lav aser. But if they're not running after you, can't kill them. But mutar l'dorsal f'teitu, we can step on them. Va'afilo b'miskavein. As long as mare atzmo ki'ilo ena miskave. As long as you show when you're doing it, you're not having kavanah. Even if you have kavanah, it's okay. So the Mishnah Berurah summarizes the positions of the Rambam and the other Rishonim, and assumes that we follow the view of other Rishonim, that one may kill harmful animals, even if no pikuach nefesh is involved. He adds that even according to this view, the leniency only applies when there is a potential of significant harm. One may not kill standard small insects that merely cause discomfort. The Rambam who holds that you're chayv from malacha shein tzrich legufa tzarich loymar dachi kamer she'ein memisin vadai, and he doesn't know for sure that it's going to kill. Elahu safek pikuach nefesh. That's always a trick. Safek pikuach nefesh is like pikuach nefesh, so it's possible pikuach nefesh. V'lachein b'ratzon achrav ikech chashash sakon tavishon. So if they're running after you, there's a chashash of sakona. Now, the Mishnah Berurah explains to us, we don't paskin like the Rambam who holds that malacha shein tzrich legufa is chayiv. We hold like Reb Shimon, that malacha shein tzrich legufa is potter. L'didon desfila malacha shein tzrich legufa mirabanan hu dasira. Av shein safek pikuach nefesh. So even if there's no safek pikuach nefesh, klal shari, you're allowed to do it. Mishum tzar b'alma, because one of the reasons to override the rabbinic prohibition of malacha shein tzrich legufa is tzar b'alma kadesh lo yisak. So he doesn't want to have pain. V'davke elu l'chol ki hay gavnim shemazikin. We're talking about animals that are going to damage you. Hein b'tivim v'nishichasim, their nature. Oket says ela she'ein darken la'amis b'zeh hamakam, that their bite stings and it could be harmful, even if they don't kill. Mashenkin parsh de le'el v'chol, but like a flea or small little insect. Guy gabs afal yedei etzikasim like a tzarkulai. If they bite you, a mosquito bites you, it's not really very painful. Bahani osur lahorgan. You can't kill them. Av kishem oitzim, even when they're biting you. Just yavrichem el, just chase them away, swat them away. The Rashba explains that the leniency to innocently tread on non-lethal creatures is also based on malacha shein tzrich legufa. But since the risk involved is less significant, when they're not running after a person, one must only kill them in an unusual manner with a shinui. Rashi already said that walking innocently on these creatures is already a davar sheino miskaven, and it's already permitted. Rashba rejects this, as it more explicitly permits treading on these creatures lechatchila. The davar sheino miskaven is by definition only a leniency. So he adds that if it is possible to trap them rather than killing them, you should trap them. Kaimelan Krab Shimon Balach Shentzrich Lagufa, we pass Krab Shimon, Afilu Hachad Bashar Mazikin, other than the non-5 that we mentioned, and these animals Kishen Ratznach Rab, you must Mishani Barigos, and you have to kill them in a Shinoi. Komav Shefsha, the best way you can. If you can hunt them or trap them, they don't kill them. Now, even though trapping is not malach, people who see are not going to notice that. But if you kill them, they'll notice it. If you can't trap them, just step on them. The Lavush explains differently that Chazal required one to avoid killing these animals in an obviously intentional manner, so that onlookers who do not know this leniency should not think that one is intentionally killing a creature on Shabbos. You can trample on them by walking in a normal way, even though you have kavanah to do it, because the malacha shein tzrich legufa, it's not a davar shein miskaven, it's a malacha that wasn't done in the Mishkan, it's not constructed. Minator mutter. And really, the Chacham in Exeir, B'achla Gazru. Ela Shamara Atzma Ne'arok Hilein Miskave. You just have to show yourself that you're not having kavanah. Shalo Yomu Zen Noitel Neshama. Oh, this guy's killing life on Shabbos. And they don't know to differentiate. Now, the Orchos Shabbos concludes for us a summary. Balei Chaim Shnishichochan Mesukenes. Animals, if they bite you, it's dangerous. Could go nachash, a snake, or akrav, are seim, venomous snakes or scorpions. Or a rabid, or kelev, show you a rabid dog. The chiyotzabo. Mutter lahorgam b'Shabbos. You're allowed to kill them on Shabbos. Afilu eina miskarvim ela, even though they're not coming close to you. If you know that they have a bee allergy, you can kill the wasp or the bee if they're in the area of the person. Then, let's say the bite's it's a hard bite, it's not gonna kill them. A non-venomous snake. So yesh lahavchin b'zeh ben shnei mikrim. Im heim rotzim achav laziko muter larka. If the snake is running after you, so you can kill him. Im einam rotzim achrav. If they're not running after you, ein heter lahorga. You can't kill them in a normal way. Elarak l'dorsal l'fitumo. You could, if you step on them as you walk, that's permitted. Ba'oifen shadavar nira kilu ein miskaven lakam. You have to sort of show it as you're walking that you're not having kavanah to kill him. In that fashion, they permitted the killing. Even though he has kavanah to kill him. But the bee or the hornet and other insects, Chacham did not allow you to kill them. Even if they run after you to harm you. Unless you know for sure there's a sakan. Okay, I'm going to stop here today. And because we got a fair amount to go on this.
Go ahead.
Okay, so